The sinister captain, 8 haunted rules on our cargo ship in the Gulf of Alaska revealed. Sarah stepped onto the deck of the Midnight Star, and the chill of the Alaskan wind stole her breath. The ship creaked like an old man's bones, a weary vessel that echoed stories of lost souls and whispered horrors. In the few moments it took her to cross the threshold from the wharf to the gangplank, she felt a shiver crawl down her spine, a warning she couldn't quite shake off. The crew eyed her warily, their expressions a mix of skepticism and something darker hiding beneath their rugged facades. "Get used to it," one of them hollered, "the sea will eat you alive if you let it." As the words settled in the air like a heavy fog, Sarah's heart sank. Beneath the harsh surface lay a truth she was not yet ready to confront. This job was her last hope, a desperate attempt to keep her daughter, Lily, safe from the clutches of mounting bills and a life without food. But could this place be worse than where they were? Her hands trembled as she thought about her little girl. She tightened her grip on the worn straps of her backpack. That first night, the wind howled like a beast demanding sacrifice. Sarah clutched the railing while trying to balance fear and determination. The haunting sounds from the ship's bowels sent her heart racing. A low, murmuring groan echoed from the depths, twisting her stomach. The crew whispered amongst themselves, cautioning each other about the 8 rules. She caught snippets: heed the shadows, keep your wits about you, fear the water's embrace. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let us continue. As the week dragged on, shadows lengthened and a palpable fear spiraled through the ship. Eyes darted, whispers turned to frantic shouts. Paranoia sank its claws deep, especially when Jack, a burly deckhand, disappeared without a trace. The search had been frantic, and yet, the sea seemed to swallow him whole. The crew's nerves frayed like the torn ropes that hung near the hull. "Captain Rourke knows more than he lets on," a voice, low and hushed, slithered into Sarah's ears one evening. She turned to see an old sailor, his face lined with weathered tales. "He has a connection to this ship's dark past, mark my words." Each night grew worse. The wind carried distant screams that sent a chill down her spine. And Captain Rourke, with his brooding demeanor, turned more distant, his eyes always fixed on the horizon like he was searching for something buried in the depths. Then, one stormy night, just as the fury of the elements seemed to mount its fiercest attack, Sarah stumbled upon a hidden compartment. Her heart pounded, cascading breaths filled with anxiety and dread. Gestures from a few crew members confirmed what she feared. The 8 rules were not just a superstition, they were bindings that tied the living to the dead, ensuring that the wrath of the ship's cursed history wouldn't consume them all. And just as she pieced it together, a scream split the air, a bone-chilling, soul-curdling scream that echoed like a siren song of doom. It was then she knew, choices had to be made, and the past wasn't done with them yet. Somehow, hidden truths loomed over her like the storm clouds swirling outside, threatening to drown them all in darkness. Sarah's heart raced, each beat sounding like a war drum in the deafening silence that followed the scream. The wind whipped at her, as if trying to tear her away from the haunting secrets lurking aboard the Midnight Star. She glanced at the crew, their faces pale, eyes wide with fear. They were no longer just hardened men, they were terrified children, caught in an adult game of survival. "Did you hear that?" someone whispered, barely containing a tremor. It was Mark, the youngest of the crew. His voice shook like the ship itself. "Yeah, and it came from below deck." Sarah whispered back, her throat dry, every word a struggle. Fear twisted around her like a suffocating fog. "We should check it out," another voice, Chris, said too boldly. The look in his eyes was desperate, searching for courage in the face of dread. But all that met him was silence. With a nod, Sarah steeled herself. She had to know what was going on. It was already too late to turn back. They moved closer to the hatch, the wooden door creaking ominously as they pried it open. A rush of cold air spilled out, smelling of seawater and something rotten. Every nerve in her screamed to retreat, but the adrenaline pulled her forward. Descending the steps, she felt the weight of their history pressing down on her. The dim light flickered, casting shadows that danced along the walls like phantoms. Each step echoed, amplifying the fear that lodged itself in her throat. She could hear her heartbeat thumping louder, drowning out even the howling wind above. "Where are we going?" Mark's voice was barely a whisper now as they reached the corridor. "Down there," she gestured toward the end of the hallway where the sound intensified. A disturbing gurgle churned through the ship's belly, a mournful and unearthly sound. Suddenly, Jack appeared before them, his wild eyes sparkling with madness. "You shouldn't have come down here," he shouted, grasping Sarah's arm with a vice-like grip. Panic surged through her, but somewhere behind Jack, shadows fluttered and twisted, whispering secrets of torment. "Jack, where have you been?" Chris asked, stepping back, his voice shaky. "I can't tell you." "Not here." Jack's eyes darted around, filled with dread as if he could almost see the shadows lurking. "The rules." They are. A guttural roar erupted from the depths, cutting him off. The sound seemed to vibrate through the metal walls, wrapping around them like barbed wire. They stood frozen, caught between the unknown horrors that lay ahead and the frantic whispers of the past that urged them to turn back. With a sudden spark of resolve, Sarah pulled Jack closer. "What happens if we break the rules? What happens if we don't?" His face darkened, shadowed by the flickering light as if he aged in an instant. "If you don't, you might find something worse than death. The ship, it chooses, and it never forgets." She looked at her companions, their expressions a mixture of terror and determination. Questions clawed at her mind, each one more urgent than the last. Could they really escape? Was there a way to break this cycle of despair started by the cursed captain? But before she could voice her worries, the flickering lights went out, plunging them into darkness. The roar grew louder, morphing into a chorus of anguished cries. Shadows flitted around them, tangible and monstrous. "Run!" she screamed, taking off down the corridor, her footsteps echoing like thunder in the cavity of the ship. The others followed closely, hearts pounding against their chests, but behind them, something dark stirred. As they reached the stairs, the ship seemed to come alive beneath them, pulsating with restlessness. A voice, cold and chilling, whispered through the darkness, "You've already entered the depths, now you must pay the price." Sarah stumbled, pushing onward as the dread settled deeper, immersed in the storm of fear, ever closer to a truth she desperately wished to escape. What would she sacrifice to keep her daughter safe, herself, or something worse? The midnight star surged beneath her feet, and as Sarah glanced back, the shadows closed in, threatening to claim them all. It was only the beginning. Would the ship's sinister history finally be laid to rest, or were they merely pawns in a dark game of fate? They burst into the open air above decks, gasping as the night air swallowed them whole. The ocean roared against the midnight star's hull like a beast disturbed from its slumber. Sarah's instincts flared, furious as she fought to steady her breath. "Where do we go?" Mark panted beside her, his eyes wide and frantic. The shadows stayed close, drifting along the edges of the ship's glow as if they had a life of their own. "Back! We need to warn the others," Chris shouted, scanning for anyone among the crew. Yet, there was no one, just an eerie emptiness that replaced the cacophony of men and machinery. Jack's gaze darted around, almost frantically. "We can't go back up." "Not yet." The rules. Another roar echoed from below, followed by a series of blood-curdling screams that sent chills gnawing at Sarah's spine. The voice sliced through the night like a knife, reverberating off the very bones of the ship. "Keep moving," Sarah yelled, taking charge. She fumbled for the flashlight clipped to her belt, its feeble beam cutting through the darkness. The dim light highlighted faces twisted in terror, and shadows crawling along the edges of cargo crates. "Jack, what are these rules you keep talking about?" Sarah demanded, feeling like they were pinched in a vice, a desperate need for answers bearing down upon them. "There are things that can be unleashed by those who enter the ship with ill intentions," Jack said, his voice shaky. "We must appease them, sacrifice something of ours. The cost is always high." Chris looked incredulous. "Sacrifice? What do you mean?" "I'm not giving up anything. The ship will take what it wants." Jack screamed back, pointing urgently towards the hatch where they had just fled. "If you don't give, it will take everything, even lives." Sarah shivered but pushed on. "We don't have time for this. We need to regroup." Suddenly, a figure emerged at the end of the deck, one of the crew members, eyes glazed over and skin pallid, moving like a marionette with its strings cut. Behind him, the shadows began to stretch ever wider, forming grotesque figures that lurched closer. "Get away from him!" Sarah shrieked, her heart pounding. She ran forward, pushing through the fear that gripped her gut. She needed to save him, whatever horror was upon them. She couldn't stand by, but the moment she reached the crewman, a piercing scream exploded from his lips, and a shadow lunged out, swallowing him whole. Eyes wide, Sarah stumbled back, her screams merging with the horrifying symphony of despair. "We have to split up." Jack yelled over the cacophony, his eyes were frantic. "We can gather supplies and then meet back at the lifeboats." "We can? Are you insane?" Chris shot back. "We can't leave each other in this madness. Trust me. It's the only way we can survive." Jack pressed, grabbing Mark's arm. With another guttural roar, the ship seemed to sway beneath them. The very walls moaned in response, as if aware of the chaos erupting aboard. Clashing shadows flickered, revealing glimpses of twisted faces and haunting wails. Sarah felt a surge of anger. "We can't abandon one another. I won't let that happen." But deep down, doubt crept in like cold water, the dread squeezing tighter around her throat. Out of nowhere, a voice chilled the air, soft, sinister. "You've already drawn the line, Sarah, and now the choice is yours." She turned to see the glimmer of darkness take shape, an embodiment of every fear she harbored. It moved closer, and Sarah knew they needed to fight, to grasp onto something solid amidst the chaos. Would they give in to despair, surrendering their hope to the shadows, or spark a rebellion against fate, taking a stand before it was too late? The midnight star trembled, and Sarah's grip tightened around the beam of her flashlight as she prepared to face the darkness ahead. Would they ever escape the clutches of fate? Or would the terrible history of this cursed ship propel them toward a horrifying demise? The night swallowed them deeper as Sarah stood at the precipice of fear and decision. The shadows twisted and writhed, forming a mass that seemed to pulse with a heartbeat of its own. Every instinct screamed for her to flee, yet something anchored her in place, holding her at the edge of this abyss. "Stay together!" she shouted, but the words felt weak, lost between the echoed howls and the sinister chuckle creeping from the shadows. Jack's eyes darted around like a trapped animal. "They'll come for us. We need to move." He grabbed Mark's shoulder, shaking him. "Now!" Mark was frozen, paralyzed by the horror surrounding him. What do we do?" "Focus!" Chris yelled, clenching his fists. "We need a plan. We can't just run into darkness." The shadows crept closer, tendrils of smoke brushing against their skin, cold like death. Sarah swallowed hard, her heart pounding against her ribs like the drums of war. "We can find a weapon or something. Anything to fight back." Just as she began to inch away from the gathering darkness, the ship groaned, its wood creaking ominously beneath them. The lights flickered, casting a strobe-like effect on the shadows, distorting reality until it felt like they were in some monstrous film. "Run!" Sarah screamed, breaking free from the eerie paralysis. She took off towards the lifeboats, her feet pounding against the deck, adrenaline surging through her veins. Chris and Jack scrambled after her, Mark lagging behind, his breathing ragged. As they reached the lifeboat area, an unsettling sight awaited them. The lifeboats were there, yet they hung from the ship like forgotten relics, a cruel reminder of hope denied. Each one was weighed down, ropes thick and knotted, as if the ship itself resisted their escape. "Help me with these ropes," Chris barked, scrambling up to a lifeboat. He fumbled with the knots, frustration evident on his face. Mark stood back, eyes wild. "What if we're too late? What if they don't say it?" Sarah cut in, shaking her head as she joined Chris, grasping the rope with trembling hands. "We can't think like that. We have to believe we can get out of here." At that moment, a roar erupted from the depths of the ship, deeper and more visceral than before, causing Sarah to jerk back. A figure emerged from the shadows, a horrifying silhouette, tall and twisted. It took a step forward, and every ounce of her resolve crumbled. "Mark!" she yelled, trying to pull him away, but it was too late. The figure lunged, a dark mass swallowing Mark whole as he let out a choked scream. "No! No!" Chris screamed as Mark's voice cut off abruptly. The darkness thickened in the air, swirling around them like smoke, suffocating hope. Jack's face twisted in horror as he grasped at whatever remained of his sanity. "We need to go. Now!" But as they ran, Sarah felt something else. A lingering whisper curled around her thoughts like smoke. "You chose this path. You'll pay the price." They burst into the corridor, the ship yawning wider, shadows closing in on all sides. With every step, the air thickened, pressing down on them. The walls dripped with a wet darkness that seemed to pulse alive, slithering closer with every heartbeat. "We can't let it take us too," Chris shouted, just as a grotesque hand shot out from the wall, clawing at the air. Sarah ducked, barely avoiding the grasp. "Where are we headed?" she gasped, panic flooding her voice. We find the captain," Jack declared, tears of desperation streaming down his face. "If anyone knows how to break the rules, it's him." "Then what are we waiting for?" With renewed determination, they sprinted through the passage, shadows clawing at their heels. As they turned a corner, a door loomed ahead. Without hesitation, they burst through, only to find themselves in a dimly lit mess hall, long abandoned. The stench of mildew wrapped around them like a death shroud, and there sitting at the head of a table was the captain himself. His eyes were pools of darkness, vacant and unfeeling. "So you've come," he said, voice low and raspy. "But every choice has its consequences." Sarah's stomach dropped. The night wasn't over, not by a long shot. The shadows loomed ever closer, and the weight of the captain's stillness sent a chill racing down her spine. What horrors awaited in the depths of the midnight star? What was the price of survival? A silence fell over the mess hall, oppressive and thick. The captain's presence was suffocating, a dark energy that seemed to pull the very air from their lungs. Sarah glanced nervously at Jack and Chris, their faces pale, reflecting the same fear simmering in her gut. "What do you mean?" Chris stammered, desperation clawing at his voice. "Consequences for what?" The captain leaned forward, fingers interlaced. "For stepping aboard. For meddling in things beyond your understanding. The rules are not mere words. They are life and death." Sarah felt the walls close in, the shadows flickering with malevolence. "What rules?" A twisted smile crawled across the captain's lips, revealing jagged teeth. He rose from his chair, the wood creaking under his weight. "The rules of the Midnight Star keep this ship afloat, and keep the darkness at bay. But you've already broken one. The other rules, well, they're about to bring you nightmares." Jack took a step back, eyes wild with panic. "We didn't sign up for this. We just wanted to leave." "Yes," the captain hissed, "but there's a toll when you desire freedom. Each soul on this ship was exchanged for another. You're not just passengers, you're part of the sacrifice. What are you talking about? Sarah breathed, her heart pounding louder, each beat echoing the fear that threatened to consume her. The shadows will not relent, he said, voice low and grave. They hunger. And every choice you make now will either save or seal your fate. Suddenly, the ship groaned, a deep, echoing rumble reverberating through the walls. Flickering lights above extinguished, plunging the room into murky darkness. The cold crept in, icy fingers brushing against their skin. Chris swore under his breath, pulling Sarah closer. There has to be a way out. He shouted, but his voice quavered. Look! Jack pointed just as a shadow peeled itself away from the wall, advancing towards them, its form shifting and writhing like smoke. It's coming. The abomination loomed larger, ink-black and featureless, but its presence flooded every sense with pure dread. You will face the consequences of your trespass. It ebbed, voice like grinding stone. Sarah's breath quickened. Not if we fight. We can't let it take us. The captain chuckled darkly. Fight? You can only hope to survive the night. There's no defeating it. Chris grabbed a broken piece of wood from the table, it was splintered and rusted. No, we'll find something. His words cut off as the shadow lunged. Jack dove, tackling Sarah to the ground just as the tendril brushed her cheek, leaving a cold sting like ice on fire. She gasped, rolling away from the grasping shadows. We need to move. Sarah yelled, scrambling to her feet. To the door. Where will it lead? Chris shouted, eyes wide. To the captain's quarters? The bridge? Jack yelled back, desperation mounting. The abomination twisted, screeching, a sound that reverberated through the hall like nails on a chalkboard. The shadow unnaturally expanded, blocking their escape. Life extinguished, they had nowhere left to run. Choose quickly. The captain howled, his eyes glowing with a strange light. Fate waits on no one. Sarah's heart raced, her instincts screaming, as she weighed her options. What would she risk? What rule would she break next? Now or never? Jack yelled, lunging towards the door, the only glimmer of salvation left, but as the door swung open, an inky void awaited them. Sarah hesitated, fear wrapping around her like chains. Would it be death or freedom? And then the whispers returned, wrapping around her thoughts, rekindling that sinister voice, you will pay the price. With a final glance back at the horrors they were leaving behind, Sarah stepped forward into the void, plunging them into the unknown. What awaited them on the other side? Could the captain truly help them? Or had they sealed their doom? Darkness enveloped them, a suffocating shroud that swallowed all light. The air crackled with electric tension as they stumbled forward. Sarah, Jack, and Chris grasped each other's hands, their fingers intertwined in a desperate attempt at solidarity against the unseen monster that pursued them. Heartbeats thundered in her ears, a frantic rhythm echoing her panic. Where are we? Jack's whisper sliced through the silence, fear-laden and frantic. The void seemed to pulse around them, breathing with a slow, menacing rhythm, as if it was alive waiting. I don't know, Sarah murmured, trying to push back her dread. We just have to keep moving. Echoes of phantom cries drifted through the air, a cacophony of lost souls lamenting their fate. She halted, feeling the ground tremble beneath her feet. Did you hear that? Chris nodded, eyes wide. It's like they're all around us. A low growl resonated from the depths of the void, reverberating off dark walls she could not see. The very essence of fear wrapped around their throats, squeezing tighter, making each breath a battle. The shadows clung to them, whispering secrets of despair. Keep going. She urged, almost yelling now, her voice breaking the eerie stillness as they stumbled deeper into the unseen. Suddenly, a flicker of light surged through the darkness, a mere spark that shimmered like a distant star. It beckoned to them, flickering between safety and despair. Without thinking, Sarah moved toward the brightness, feet rushing forward, propelled by a flicker of hope. Wait! Jack shouted, but his voice was consumed by the darkness, his caution lost within the hunger of the void. The light expanded, a doorway thrown open before them. Shadows writhed agonizingly at the edges, clawing at the air. It screamed of danger, but they charged through it with reckless determination, each step another rebellion against the terror that gripped their hearts. They stumbled into another dimly lit room, filled with the scent of salt and metal. The walls pulsated with an otherworldly energy. Before them loomed furniture of old, rustic designs, everything marred by a deep patina of neglect. This was the heart of the Midnight Star, the captain's quarters. What now? Chris panted, leaning against a heavy oak desk, gasping for breath. The captain stood there waiting, eyes glowing with sickening delight. Welcome back. You're lucky to be here. Jack wiped sweat from his brow, anger igniting in his chest. What the hell did you do to us? The captain smiled, revealing teeth that glinted like knives in the pale light. I did nothing. You brought this upon yourselves. You broke the first rule, and now loss awaits you. Just like those who came before you. Suddenly the shadows thickened, swirling around the captain until he was almost lost within them. You must face the truths of your actions. Your choices hold weight. You need to survive the awakenings. Awakenings? Sarah asked, dread curdling in her stomach. Each rule broken summons them, he replied, his voice growing softer, like the rustle of dead leaves. And now you face the consequences, the nightmares that dwell deep within the Midnight Star. They will come for you. A rancid wind gusted through the quarters, pulling at their hair and clothes, bringing with it a howling chorus of torment. Shadows poured forth from every corner, grotesque figures forming from the abyss. No! No! Chris shouted, stepping back, terror illuminating his features. The captain's smile widened, twisted. When fear turns to despair, the nightmares will arrive. They know your secrets, your fears. In that moment, Sarah understood. They weren't there simply to escape, they were meant to confront the darkness within. Every choice they made had led them here, to the brink of oblivion. As the shadows surged closer, their forms jagged and terrible, Sarah felt the ice of desperation creep up her spine. We can't let them take us, she breathed, a flicker of defiance igniting in her chest. But would their fight be enough to break the cycle? Or would they, too, become part of the Midnight Star's dark tale? An anguished scream echoed, and the shadows surged forward, ready to swallow them whole. Would they discover the true meaning of sacrifice? Or had they already lost their battle for freedom? The shadows lunged, a dark wave of malice sweeping toward them. A guttural growl rose from somewhere deep within the darkness, clamoring for their souls. Fear rippled through Sarah, igniting a desperate instinct to escape. She grabbed Jack and Chris, pulling them closer, feeling their panic radiate like a fever. We have to go. She shouted, her voice trembling with urgency. They turned, running blindly into the thickening gloom. The howling grew louder, a bizarre symphony of agony and chaos crashing against their ears. Suddenly, a claw-like hand reached out from the shadows, grasping at Chris's ankle. He stumbled, falling hard to the ground. Sarah! Help! His voice was raw with terror, echoing against the ghostly walls. She lunged for him, the moment stretching into eternity as tendrils of darkness snaked around them. The shadows pulsed, hungry for their fear. Get up! Get up! Sarah screamed. Jack pulled Chris to his feet, his face pale and desperate. In that moment, the darkness paused, as if weighing their fear against their defiance. It was a brief respite, but a flicker of hope burned within her. Maybe, just maybe, they could fight back. Chris! Are you okay? Jack asked, scanning Chris for injuries as they caught their breath. We need a plan. Why did we even come here? Chris gasped, eyes wide with grasping terror. This was a mistake. We should turn back. Listen. Sarah said, trying to pull them together. It doesn't matter now. We're here, and we have to find a way out. The captain, he mentioned rules. Maybe we can use that to our advantage? A deep rumble shook the quarters, as if the ship cried out in torment. What do you mean? Jack asked, confusion flickering over his face. The rules, Sarah repeated. The captain said each rule we broke summons the nightmares. We need to find out what those rules are. It might explain how to fight these things. Lifting her breath, Sarah led them deeper into the cursed captain's quarters, looking for clues as lingering shadows writhed in anticipation. A cracked map hung on the wall, ancient and torn. It depicted a labyrinthine route around the Midnight Star and labeled several points in alarming red ink. She hurried forward, tracing her finger over one marked location. "Look here!" she shouted. "The graveyard of choices." "What does that mean?" "I don't want to find out," Jack muttered, the gloom suffocating them. "The only way is forward," Sarah insisted, though uncertainty gnawed at her. She could feel them lurking, millions of eyes watching, waiting for them to falter. Chris stumbled, his breath hitching in his throat. "Look!" he gasped, pointing behind them. Shadows began to twist into shapes, more defined now, hands clawing, faces contorted in silent screams. They needed to move. They saw that the shadows weren't just a futile force, they were crafted from their darkest fears, remnants of guilt and regrets woven into this endless night. The trio pressed forward into the dim light of the captain's lantern, desperately seeking something tangible. From the darkened corners, faint whispers coiled around them like a cold breeze. "You cannot escape your choices." The captain's voice echoed in the distance, vibrating through the walls. "You want to know the rules? Break and suffer. Taste the shadow you embrace." Panic surged again. "We can't stay here," Sarah urged. "Whatever the awakenings are, we can't wait for them to arrive." Yet, as they darted toward what they hoped was freedom, silhouettes withdrew, morphing into the figure of the captain once more. His grin was hollow, teeth glistening under the dim light, teeth that were more than blades, they were promises of pain. "I hope you're ready," he crooned, shadow fingers reaching toward them with deceptive slowness. The ground trembled beneath them as another anguished wail rose from the dark, sending a shiver up Sarah's spine. "What's coming?" Jack's voice broke, the tremor unmistakable. As shadows spiraled in chaos, the three friends stared in horror, realizing the truth: they were not just running from monsters, they were running toward the inevitable. "Sarah!" Chris yelled, but it was too late. The shadows surged and enveloped them, plunging them into a mind-bending void of darkness and despair. Would they be able to gather the strength to face the nightmares that awaited? Or were they destined to be yet another group swallowed by the Midnight Star? The engulfing darkness felt like a weight, suffocating every breath, every hope. Shadows twisted, their body parts morphed into nightmarish shapes, too grotesque to comprehend. A suffocating silence cloaked the three friends, urging them deeper into despair. "Get up!" Sarah shouted inside an abyss formed by fear. "Don't let it win." Jack and Chris, trembling, stood close together. The oppressive air was thick with unspoken dread, but they could not afford to fall apart. "What now?" Chris whispered, his voice barely rising above the oppressive stillness. "Remember the map?" Sarah panted, glancing around the bleak room as if expecting the horrors to strike at any moment. "We need to reach the graveyard. Those rules, we have to uncover them." They pressed forward, the walls slipping away, and every step felt like drawing the attention of unseen terrors. Building resolution with every heartbeat, they charged down a narrow corridor, racing against the echoes of their own panic. As they moved, the shadows seemed intent on snatching them back. Cold tendrils brushed against them, slithering along their skins, leaving trails of chilling despair. Chris recoiled, letting out a terrified yelp. "Stay close," Jack hissed, gripping Chris's shoulder. "It's like they're sensing our fear," Sarah said, hurrying her steps. Above their heads, dangling lanterns flickered feebly, casting ghostly light and revealing fleeting glimpses of crawling obscurities. Suddenly, a strong gust swelled from nowhere, sweeping through the corridor. The swirling darkness howled, encircling them, daring them to turn back. "You can't hide," it rumbled, a voice filled with mockery and threat. "Run!" Jack shouted, lunging past the oppressive winds pulling at their clothes. They sprinted, disoriented, the shadows closing in. Ahead, light flickered like a beacon through the murk. "Is that?" Chris gasped, pointing toward the glow illuminating the far end. "There's something there." Rushing toward it, they found an old, decaying door plastered with unfamiliar symbols. An unsettling energy pulsated as if the door itself were a living creature, beckoning them with whispers of lost souls. "Open it? What if it's worse?" Chris pressed, the dread clear in his eyes, but Sarah felt gravity drawing her in. "We need answers. We can't let this be the end." Jack nodded, determination hardening his expression. "Let us see what's behind it. We can't just hide forever." With a deep breath, Sarah reached for the handle, cold metal biting her palm. She turned it slowly, anticipation mingling with dread. The door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit chamber, walls lined with ancient books and maps, remnants of lost voyages. In the center, a single table stood, draped in dark fabric, and on that table rested a dusty journal, the captain's journal. It's him," Jack mumbled, eyes wide with revelation. Sarah approached, heart racing as she opened the creaky pages. The text was scrawled with wild, frenzied writing, each letter dripping with madness. Words jumped off the page: "Eat your fears. Live your choices. The price of escape is skin and bone." A jolt ran through Sarah. This is it. This is the key to the chaos. We need to learn these rules. But just as she began to decipher the scrawled notes, shadows surged, pulling at Sarah, Chris, and Jack with a vengeance. The laughter echoed around them, mocking, demanding. An invisible hand gripped at their throats, the darkness seeped into their minds, feeding off their dread. "Don't let it take you," Chris yelled, struggling against the suffocating force. "What do we do?" Jack cried, frantically glancing back at the journal, desperate for guidance. As the room began to dissolve into the abyss, Sarah felt her resolve unraveling. The pages fluttered wildly in the vortex, threatening to rip away the only hope they had. "Read it!" she screamed, pushing the journal at Jack, who wrestled against the dark tide threatening to drown them, but as he grasped it, a shadow erupted from the journal, tendrils coiling and curling, forming a monstrous visage, one that mirrored their deepest fears. "We will claim you," it hissed. "You cannot outrun your choices." And as screams echoed in the chamber, the ground shook, tossing them apart, one swallowed by shadows, the others yanked into fractured reality. "Sarah!" Jack yelled, his voice swallowed by darkness. The room faded entirely, leaving behind an echoing threat, a new haunt, waiting to claim its next victim. What horror awaited Sarah alone in the darkened pits of the Midnight Star? Would they be forever lost to the darkness that fed on despair? Or was it a chance to reclaim their choices? The air around Sarah was thick with a suffocating pressure, as if the very essence of the darkness were trying to force itself inside her lungs. She stumbled forward, her heart pounding against her ribcage, desperate to escape the malevolent force that had just devoured her friends. The chamber around her flickered with intermittent light, shadows dancing in grotesque forms, taunting and gloating. "Jack! Chris!" she called out, her voice breaking in sheer panic. But the silence that followed felt heavier than before, a suffocating void swallowing her cries. The journal lay before her, pages fluttering like trapped butterflies caught in a storm. She snatched it, her fingers trembling as she flipped through the maddened scrawl. Each word seemed to pulsate with an unsettling rhythm, a heartbeat that wasn't her own. "Eat your fears. Live your choices." The echo of the insidious whisper pulsed in her mind. A chill crawled up her spine. She scanned the dark corners of the room, straining to sense any movement. Where had they gone? The shadows around her writhed, swirling like ink in water. Fear gripped her. She knew she had to think quickly. The journal might hold answers. She focused on the word rules. It was there, lurking in her thoughts. The captain had made choices, dark, bone-chilling decisions. What had happened to him? Her hands shook as she pressed her palm against one of the pages. It whispered back, the ink absorbed into her skin like a poison, as if imprinting the secrets deep within her. Suddenly, a surge of images crossed her eyes, ghostly figures rising from the depths, echoes of anguished pleas, and shadows that twisted into the shapes of the damned. Rule 1, embrace your fears to live, she muttered, her heart racing with newfound dread. The shadows seemed to pulse, wrapping tighter around her. Could she truly embrace what terrified her to escape? The thought was sickening, the laughter from the darkness reverberated, mocking her thoughts. You cannot escape. You must face your choices. Sarah staggered backward, lashes stinging with tears, blocking it out. She wasn't ready to confront the essence of fear itself. But the very air called her cowardly. No, I will not be theirs. She shouted, frustration igniting strength within her. The light flickered more violently now, outlining a doorway at the back of the chamber, the only exit she could see. With strength pressed against her fear, she dashed toward it, clutching the journal to her chest. The shadows lunged, searching for an opening to ensnare her, but she outpaced them. As she burst through the doorway, a blast of cold air engulfed her, stripping away the heat of desperation. She stood in a hall that felt infinitely longer, flickering lights casting shadows of memories, each one a reflection of her past decisions. Her breaths came rapidly, each echoing against the walls. Somewhere behind her, a growl resonated, chilling her blood. She pressed on, the journal a blazing weight in her grasp, but its fickle whispers urged caution, swirling through her mind, forcing her to confront the possibility that all was not lost. Suddenly, the passage split into two. One path was choked with shadows, pulsing as if alive, while the other was bathed in a pale, ghostly light. Choose. A voice growled. The tension hung, electric, threatening to snap as she weighed her options, but in that critical moment, something moved behind her. A silhouette grew, stretching tall and wide, shimmering with malice. It hovered, waiting to see her decision. As she stood frozen in fear, the shadow whispered her name, drawing closer with each heart-stopping beat. Will Sarah confront the essence of her fears in the darkness, or will she let them consume her? What lay in the path of light, and would she dare to reach for it? With a deep breath, Sarah stepped into the glowing path bathed in pale light, each footfall vibrant against the chilling darkness surrounding her. The shadows hissed, their sinister whispers curling around her like smoke, but she pushed through, clutching the journal tightly. Every word scrawled on its pages echoed in her mind, embrace your fears to live. Remember, Sarah, she whispered to herself, you have to live for Lily. The path twisted ahead, shifting as if it sensed her determination. Each step ignited something inside her, a flame of survival that refused to be extinguished. Directly ahead, a door loomed, emanating warmth that beckoned her with a gentle glow. As Sarah reached for the handle, the shadows behind her writhed violently, their whispers turning into agonized screams. You cannot escape your choices. They howled in a cacophonous echo that rattled her core. She flung open the door, stepping through quickly. The instant she crossed the threshold, the shadows halted, screeching, but the warmth enveloped her like a soft embrace. She found herself in a vast chamber, lined with flickering lanterns that illuminated countless pictures, faces of despair, anguish, and as she gulped, hope. In the center, a pedestal stood, adorned with a single cut crystal that shimmered with every color imaginable. It hummed, resonating with a pulse that seemed to synchronize with her heartbeat. Fearing the shadows would follow, she rushed toward it. What is this? She breathed, reverently reaching for the crystal. A choice, an ethereal voice whispered, surrounding her like a soft breeze. It can harness your fears, or free you from their grip. But the choice must be deliberate. What you choose to gather and confront will determine your release. Glimpses of her past flashed before her, moments of failure, regret, and terror. But among these shadows, blossomed memories of joy, love, and resilience. Sarah felt a flood of emotion. The love for her daughter pulsed brightly, drowning out the despair. Trembling, she pressed her palm against the crystal, feeling it warm beneath her touch. She spoke clearly, "I choose to confront my fears. I embrace them with all my heart. For Lily. For my freedom." In an instant, the shadows shrieked, recoiling as if burned by her declaration. Light erupted from the crystal, wrapping around her, cascading through the chamber. The whispers turned into anguished wails as the shadows began to disintegrate, wisps of darkness dispersing into mere flickers of smoke. Time felt suspended, as Sarah stood enveloped in warmth and light. Through the swirling chaos, she thought of Jack and Chris. They needed her, just as much as she needed to find them. With newfound strength, she focused on their faces, calling out with all her might, "Jack! Chris! I'm coming for you!" The light flared, illuminating a new doorway that shimmered like a beacon of hope. Heart thundering, Sarah sprinted toward it, leaving the remnants of her past behind. Bursting through the door, Sarah suddenly found herself back in the captain's quarters. Jack and Chris were there, trembling yet alive, their expressions morphing from panic to disbelief. "Sarah!" Jack shouted, rushing forward, relief evident in his eyes. "They're fading, the shadows they wouldn't let us go." Chris gasped, shaking with terror. "I know. But I made a choice," Sarah panted, her heart racing with urgency. "We can break this cycle. We can confront whatever darkness remains." Together, they clasped hands tight, the warmth flowing between them felt stronger than the shadows tugging at the edges of the room. With each heartbeat, shadows dared to encroach upon their light, but they pushed back. And just then, the captain lingered at the edge of their vision, his face twisted in rage. "You think you can defy fate? You must pay the price," he thundered. Sarah and her friends stepped forward boldly, refusing to let fear consume them. "We choose our path," Sarah declared, her voice firm and resonant. "And we will face whatever price it may be." The captain's shadow flickered uncertain. "Then you will confront the truth of your choices." In a blinding flash, the room transformed, surrounded by visions of haunting choices made throughout her life, moments of both darkness and light. But Sarah stood tall, Jack and Chris flanking her. They embraced their pasts together, and in doing so, the weight of their fears lessened under the fierce light of their resolve. The darkness receded, whispers of anguish replaced with echoes of strength. With their collective will entwined, they found themselves forcefully thrust back into the storm-tossed deck of the Midnight Star, darkness melting away like a bad dream. The ship trembled, shadows retreating, dissipating into the stars overhead. They had done it. They had chosen life over despair. Hope bloomed, washing over them in waves as the ship heaved a sigh, no longer burdened by anguish. As the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, illuminating the sea, Sarah felt a wave of peace pull her in. She was alive, and so was Lily. They stood together, staring out over the water that previously held them captive. Sarah whispered, "We're free now." Jack nodded, tears brimming, while Chris laid a hand on her shoulder, sharing the bittersweet victory of survival. There was a long silence, filled with gratitude and relief. They had made it through the darkest night beneath the Midnight Star. "We'll go home now," Sarah said, her heart finally at rest. As they embraced, memories of horror faded, leaving behind the strength of their choices, a bond forged in the shadows. They had unraveled the curse and embraced a promise of brighter days ahead. Now, dear friends, let us celebrate this journey together. You need to subscribe now to catch every thrilling moment in future stories that await. This is the moment to show your support. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and help our stories reach those who need them most. Flood the comments section with your thoughts on this ending. What are your reactions, your theories? I want to hear it all. Don't wait even one more second to share this chapter with at least 5 friends who need to witness this incredible conclusion. Together, we'll explore even more chilling tales. You are part of this adventure, let us keep it going.